Welcome to the Foreign Book Club. We are now talking about chapters 4 through 7 of Sohrab Ahmari's book, From Fire by Water. We have at Ignatius Press, myself, Father Fessio, and Vivian Dudro, our senior editor. And joining us is the co-host from South Carolina, Joseph Pierce. And we're really putting all the burden on Joseph here. So Joseph, take it away.
Well, thank you. I mean, I would say that I'm thoroughly enjoying this book. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Not only is it well written, Sohrab Ahmari is very engaged and engaging. It's almost sort of a history of Western philosophy. Certainly, Enlightenment Western philosophy. The middle part of the book, which we're discussing today, is his philosophical journey, having left Iran, being affronted by Western philosophy. And I think it's a very interesting journey he takes us on in these first years that he's actually in the United States.
And I think these chapters 4 through 7 are really the core of his conversion. And I had the same thought, Joseph, that he's kind of a microcosm of the West from the Enlightenment to the present. He starts with, he loses his faith in God, so rationalism and atheism, and then he goes through Nietzsche, and then Camus, and Sartre, and then Marx, and then he has this kind of conversion that goes to the Post-Modernists, and then he confronts the gospel. So really, it's not just a story of one man's conversion. This is kind of a window into the intellectual dynamism or dynamic of Western culture.
Yeah, I think one of the glories of this book is the fact that, that we do see, last week we had an insight into life in post-revolutionary Iran, which is certainly very enlightening for us. And now we have an insight, what does it feel like for someone from a Muslim country on a green card to move to this country as a teenager and then, be confronted by U.S. culture, U.S. values, or the absence thereof, and then to just have this appetite for the whole of Western philosophy and to sort of have an appetite to eat it all, and then really digest it and get beyond it ultimately.
Yeah, go ahead. By the way, we should talk into the camera there. I know it's great.
Okay.
I like to look at Joseph there. We need to look at the camera.
Well,
each other.
And meanwhile, you mentioned as a teenager, this entire intellectual journey occurs in his adolescence. And he makes points along the way that the cocktail of leftist ideology and atheistic materialism really justified his feelings of alienation and rebellion and so on. He makes that point several times. I think it's an important one.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Joseph.
Well, no, I guess the one thing I found fascinating by this is actually there are really very surprising for me parallels between his journey and mine, not merely because it's fetus at ratio, but coming to the United States and then sort of being in the United States as an outsider and trying to come to terms with American culture, as a foreigner. And they're really parallel journeys.
I thought of you, Joseph, actually, as I was reading this. I thought of your story.
Well, also, I always want to ask you, Joseph, what you think the meaning of the chapter title is, because that's one of Mortimer Adler's principles of reading a book is to go through and get to know the table of contents. This chapter 4, is called Resident Alien. But yeah. You've already answered the question of why that title is so significant.
Yeah, it's a bureaucratic label, but in actual fact, it's a very good description of what people that come here from outside feel. Because even if we want to be part of what it is to be American, you can't switch that on like switching on a light switch, right? It's something you've got to acclimate toward over a period of time.
One thing to remember, though, is that even though he came out of Iran, he was not a practicing Muslim in Iran. His parents were libertine artist types. He was bathed in Western art and philosophy and culture. So he thought this was something he already knew. And then when he got to Utah, and is shocked by the banality of what he saw there, the religiosity he saw there. He really was a fish out of water in a kind of double way, because it was something he thought he was going to swim in just fine, and he found himself an outsider in ways he didn't expect.
And what God has a sense of humor, sending him from Iran with this great dream of the Utopia of America to Eden, Utah. He goes to Eden, the paradise, a trailer park in Utah. I mean, that's.
Well, speaking of Utopia, Father, he also, it's astonishing to see that here he just left a totalitarian regime intent on building a utopia based on Sharia law. So he even is surprised himself. Why wasn't he inoculated against the promise of utopia offered by leftist ideology?
Well, I think part of the problem, though, however, was that he actually believed in a utopia of sort of shallow Hollywood, NBC TV, materialistic America as well. And of course, when he came to see the real America with people that Mormons and Christians and sexuality that's not that facile sort, it was not, the utopia wasn't real. It was nowhere. It was no place.
So, Joseph, you had asked me to put up on the screen this particular passage from page 71 of the first chapter. I've got it up on the screen now, so what do you want to say about it?
Well, would you like me to read it?
Whatever you wanted it up there, you do with it.
Well, last week we read it, so as I'm a traditionalist, I'm going to stick with tradition here. We've established a tradition. Yet reality always breaks through, and it didn't take too long to do so with me. Although America's elite culture was indeed largely secular, that culture coexisted with pockets of intense religiosity. And for all the individual liberties enshrined in the US Constitution, Americans could be intensely humanitarian, even conformist. This mismatch between America as I had imagined it and as it really was became a great source of anguish for me. I reacted by picking up my rebellion against God, religious faith, and authority, where I had left it off in Iran.
All right.
Yeah, so basically what I found interesting there is that, he has complete misconception based upon, see, one thing that I've experienced, and I saw Sohrab Ahmari experiencing it, is you can't really see your own country only from the inside, and you can't see somebody else's, another country only from the outside. The only way you can really know a country is to see it both from the inside and the outside, what you might call a healthy cosmopolitanism. So for instance, and I think this was the same thing with Sohrab Ahmari, that the face of America that the rest of the world sees is Hollywood, MTV, and US foreign policy. So we judge the United States on that. Now, for me, I thought that was bad, and I came here and I saw a good America that was religious and conservative, for want of a better word. And Sohrab Ahmari actually bought into that public face, that MTV, Hollywood, US foreign policy America, and comes here and sees, if you like, the inside of the country, the heartland, and sees it's not actually what that public face that the rest of the world sees is. It's something entirely different. So it's that disconnect between the false view you get from outside, that when you come inside, you have to adjust your perception.
Good.
Good.
I think there's no more.
Good. So that sets up a conflict, and this is where conflict moves the story along, right?
Yeah, it does. I mean, the point is that that Sohrab Ahmari and I are immigrants, but we're immigrants that love the United States. But not immigrants, of course, that think that everything about the United States is perfect. But he's growing, and this book shows basically from Resident Alien, the first chapter after he's arrived in the United States, right through to the end of the book, he's growing in maturity in his relationship with the United States, from basically knowing nothing about it except a false perception, which he's affronted by reality and then reacts to come to terms with the real thing.
That's right.
Good. Let's go to the next quotation from page 82 that you want to by our tradition, which is established over 1 week. You
So
want to
then you
read?
have to start somewhere, Father, right? Um, I,
Sounds like the liturgy.
that started somewhere too. I rejected out of hand nearly all efforts by adults to guide my energies. My mother, who knew something about art and aesthetics, I utterly cowed into submission. She was expected to instantly approve of whatever I came up with, lest I throw a teenage tantrum. Nor could she prevail upon me to heed others. An Iranian novelist to whom she had mailed some of my literary efforts for critique wrote back to say, "Your son needs first to read the Hebrew Bible before he can even begin to play around with Western ideas and symbols. Me, read the outmoded superstition of the Bible. This man is insulting my intelligence." I ripped his letter to shreds. So I put that particular quote because, again, it reminded me of myself. Actually, I was a radical when I was younger, as Sohrab Ahmari was, and you were convinced that the older generation were dumb, right? They were stupid, and fixing the world was easy, and you certainly didn't need to be slowed down by suggestions you read books you weren't interested in reading, least of all the Bible. So we have this man who thinks, not man, this boy who thinks he's a man, who thinks he understands the world's problems, who thinks he has all the answers, who bullies his poor mother into submission, and then is confronted with some true wisdom and rejects it. And I think again there's a recurring pattern, a recurring motif that many of us may have recognized in ourselves from when we're younger, and many of us perhaps as parents might recognize in our children possibly.
Yes, that comes out later as well when he's studying philosophy at the university level, and he has no interest whatsoever in reading anybody pre-modern, right? This idea that if it's old, it's dead, it's outdated, and why bother? And
it's also a sort of maybe an unintentional critique and condemnation of the modern university system, because he says he was allowed to go there and do what he likes and study sort of whatever he wanted, and his professors basically just allowed him to say what he wants, read what he wants, do what he wants, and he gets his university degree basically without having to follow any set curriculum. So it seems.
right. He says he wished he had instead a chronologically ordered reading of the great books of Western civilization. He said that would have been an education, but that's not what.
And any professor would actually, have the gall to suggest that he could learn something from other people. And then, all these professors just played along, right? And just, if he sounded intelligent, they just gave him A's.
Let's move to chapter 5. The title of that is "The Road from Zarathustra." Joseph, this is your quote, but before you get to that, how would you interpret this chapter title, "The Road from Zarathustra"?
Well, that obviously the ancient religion of Iran, or Persia, to give its older name, prior to the coming of Islam, was Zarathustrianism. So so he's playing on that ancient Persian religion, and also the fact, of course, that the title of Nietzsche's book that he's talking about is Zarathustra.
Yes, and the name was Zoroaster, which people may recognize more as an ancient religion, but Nietsche took it and used the German form Zarathustra. So, on to your quote, Joseph.
Yeah, reading the great books in one's late teens is intoxicating. The critical faculties are half-formed at that age, liable to be overwhelmed by the literary master or virtuoso philosopher. The teenager reads each classic work thinking, "This book is so right, isn't it? And isn't it just so?" without pausing to note the differences among the various authors, let alone his own doubts and objections. It was in this spirit of rash enthusiasm that I approached the existentialists, starting with Nietzsche. To say that I read Nietzsche's "Thus Spoke Zarathustra" would be an understatement. I took the book home from the store, lay belly down on my bed, and finished it over 3 or 4 days, barely stepping out to eat and wash. I consumed Zarathustra, and it consumed me in turn. So there are a few things in that quote that sort of struck me. First of all, reading the great books in one's late teens is intoxicating. Great sentence, but a few words there. I mean, what constitutes a great book? I mean, to read Nietzsche in the absence of Aquinas or Augustine or Plato or Aristotle is, should we say, odd. And I like the word intoxicating, because actually intoxicating means poisoned. Literally, I mean, he's meaning, I'm sure he means it in the broader sense of going to our head. But he was actually, literally speaking, poisoned by this book. I mean, in The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, Dorian Gray said, I was poisoned by a book. And part of his descent, if you like, into decadence was being poisoned by bad reading. And here we see an example of Nietzsche in the absence, shall we say, of contextual philosophy. In other words, the greater books that came before it is dangerous. And I love the end of that. I consumed Zarathustra and it consumed me. Okay, when someone, I think it's in The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot. Let's get this right now. Maybe no, it's not a quote from The Wasteland, but the idea in The Wasteland basically is that you're supposed to devour experience. Okay, you devour experience like the typist. But sometimes when you devour experience, you're actually devoured by it, right? So you think you're gaining something and you're actually losing a great deal. And I think this idea of, I consume Nietzsche, but actually Nietzsche consumed me.
But actually, looking ahead a bit, while it was poison, I mean, normally if you take poison, it kills you. It didn't kill him.
No.
It actually made him stronger in a sense. Why? He had this tremendous intellectual curiosity. He really wanted to know. He wanted to learn. He thought he knew what was wrong with, Islam and American consumerism and so on. And he thought he found the answer, but he was looking for the truth.
Yes, that is crucial, because there's two ways of reading. We can either read in order to fortify our own prejudices, or we can read because we genuinely want to know the truth. And you're right. Now, what's clear is that even as a teenager, this young man, Sohrab Ahmari, was a seeker after truth.
Well, speaking back to this metaphor of intoxication, on page 90, in the middle there, he says, I drank, thus spoke Zarathustra, in my little room, in our little trailer, and it proved a potent elixir. It healed some of the wounds of adolescent solitude, even as it magnified my already swollen sense of self-importance.
That's wonderful, isn't it? And it's also wonderful writing, it must be said.
Yes, he's a
Wonderful
beautiful writer.
He's a
All the
wonderful
use
writer.
of these images. Yes, he's a beautiful writer.
And, I mean, for those who don't have time to read all through Nietzsche like he did, and Camus, and Sartre, and Marx, he has the ability to summarize and quote selectively and really capture the essence of these thinkers who were so influential in Western thought for so long. So in a certain sense, this is kind of a mini course for those who don't have time to read those things. You want to know what Nietzsche was said? Here it is. And here's someone who read it sympathetically, but then recognized the flaws, recognized what was wrong with it. No,
this book is much more than merely a conversion story. It is, full of good things like that. It is a beginner's guide to, shall we say, post-Enlightenment Western philosophy. It's astonishing.
It really is.
Well, let's move on then to chapter 6, called Divine Condescension. I have a quote there from you, Joseph, but first of all, why does he call this chapter Divine Condescension?
Because I think that that he is alienated from God, not seeking God, doesn't believe that God's relevant, even if he exists, but God does not ignore him. That basically God comes down to his level and touches him when he least expects it. And I think there's more than one example of that in this book, and I think that's the reason for the chapter title.
And the way that he touches him, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
go ahead. No, that's it. That's what I wanted him to say, but you go ahead.
Yeah, well, the way that he touches him, the discovery of his conscience, the discovery of, in spite of what he's read, in spite of the poisoning of his mind, there is still the whisper of conscience that he cannot deny. And that is what begs the question, well, where does the conscience come from?
Yeah, I was very much reminded of the French decadence, of Oscar Wilde. You know, that those people that thought they would just plumb the depths and do what they liked, and they lived that lifestyle with Charles Baudelaire, Paul Verlaine, Jean-Pascal Huysmans, etc. You know, and when you go deep and deep enough into your own debauchery and the debauchery of others, you discover the existence of the devil. And you know, and that's why, you know, waking up the following morning and just being, you know, seeing and remembering what he did the night before and realizing what an absolute horror that was, you know,
Yes.
caused him to recoil towards something much more good, true, and beautiful.
Aha. Actually, my thoughts were even more concrete and fleshly, perhaps, but I think you two are right. I was thinking the divine condescension is he's in Utah, he's got two college roommates who are Mormons, and he's leaving out for them all these books which you know would upset them, particularly some pornographic and salacious books. And then he's there while they're gone, and they've left out a Bible.
Yes.
And he just happens to pick up the Bible, opens the Gospel of Matthew, and reads it. And of course, as he says, the first chapter is blah, blah, blah. He did miracles, blah, blah, blah. You know, he preached, blah, blah, blah. But in chapter 26, he gets to the Passion. And in his heart, even as a Muslim, that Hussein ibn Ali was marked him something, the idea that sacrifice was important. And then for him to be rooming with these Mormons and then to find out, oh my, Jesus wasn't just this preacher they're talking about. He was an innocent man who died, you know, rather than resist.
Yes.
Yeah, I think,
The divine condescension of Christ entering the world
Yeah.
to touch him.
yeah, that's exactly. The divine condescension here, of course, is the incarnation, and specifically, of course, in that particular reading of his, the Passion. Right, the fact that not just a question of sacrifice or self-sacrifice, it's the sacrifice of the innocent. Okay, the one blameless allowing himself to take upon the punishment of others. That's what really struck him, because it was the innocent victim, not the victim, but the innocent victim, which really struck him.
And he's left with this question, why does he long for sacrifice? What is it in him that is responding first to the sacrifice of this man, Hussein, the leader of the Shia back in Iran long ago, but this sacrifice, self-sacrifice of Christ, he just doesn't understand why is this searing him inside. And he still doesn't have the answer by the time we get to this chapter ending.
Oh, but this is the quote exactly that Joseph wanted up there. So Joseph, go ahead and read this one.
Yeah, so it's this great reversal was startling and unspeakably beautiful. But why? What made Christ total surrender when he could have vanquished his enemies in an instant? So touching, even to an unbeliever. What was it about sacrifice, whether Hussein's or Jesus's, that left such a searing imprint on my mind? Why did I long for sacrifice? These questions stayed with me for many years after reading St. Matthew's Gospel. And I think here the key thing is, you know, that Christian, the Christian understanding of love is that love is the laying down of our lives for the beloved. In other words, that love is inseparable from self-sacrifice. And I think what he's longing for all of his reading of Nietzsche, what he's longing for is love. I think he sees in Jesus the lover and the meaning of what love is, and he desires that.
And yet he still has a long way to go.
He's not there yet, right? Absolutely.
A few more chapters. Well, let's move on to the 7th chapter of Borderlands. And here's the citation, Joseph, that you asked to have.
Oh, yeah, I love this. Shall I read it?
Yeah, but first tell me why the chapter is called Borderlands.
Good question. You tell me, Father.
Well, because he's read Matthew's Gospel, he's had this sense of shame, but he decides to go and do something noble, to go with Teach for America, and he goes down to Brownsville, Texas, which is on the borderland between the United States and Mexico, but it's also for him the borderland between his whole journey through, Western intellectual history to coming back to the truth of Christ.
No, you're right. I mean, that borderland there, say on a literal level, you've got the fact that's where he's going down to close to the Mexican border. But this is where he crosses the border in some senses, because this is a chapter where several thresholds are crossed. And it's not the moment of his conversion, of course, which is the threshold that we all need to cross, the Tiber, if you like. But he overcomes his naivete regarding identity politics that he got from the postmoderns. He'd overcome his naivete that he got from the Marxists. He had this very interesting relationship with the Israeli citizen that forced him to look at his own beliefs from a radical perspective, in other words, from their roots. So yes, I think that various crossroads, various borders are crossed during this chapter. So yes.
Okay, so now to your quotation here.
Yeah, well, this is how the chapter starts. It starts here, and it's a wonderful way to start the chapter. In a poem of 1577, St. Teresa of Avila wrote of how the mansion of thy mind is Almighty God's dwelling place. God says he roams the mind's corridors, knocking loud if e'er I find in thy thought a closed door. That held true even for me. I had tried to shut, lock, and bolt every entryway to God and banish him from my mind. But I couldn't attend to every nook and cranny. Many a secret door remained open to him, if by a crack. On the doors I had managed to shut, I heard the loud knocks that St. Teresa wrote about. It would take me some years, though, before I could reckon honestly with the fact that from time to time, and especially in moments of great shame or degradation, I felt compelled to fling the doors open. So the first thing there, I mean, I just love that quote from Teresa of Avila, the whole understanding of our human mind being the dwelling place of God, and insofar as we try to keep him out of his dwelling place by locking, bolting, and shutting doors, he'll knock on the doors we shut, and he'll creep through doors we've left ajar. In other words, it reminds me again, literary allusions of Francis Thompson's wonderful poem, The Hound of Heaven, right? Yes. That God is relentless in his desire for us. So I love that, and I also love the writing. Once again, it's just beautiful writing.
So go ahead.
I was just going to say, and of course, one of the ways God creeps into these passageways of our mind is reality itself. And in the very next paragraph, he says, at the slightest contact with reality, much of the bosh that clouded my mind dissipated, and a clear, crisp, new horizon presented itself to me.
Yeah,
and I love that. Interesting that, in his search, he's leaving Iran. He rejects the Islamic culture. He thinks he's going to be a great American. He loves America, but finds out what he loves is a chimera, so to speak. So now he's on his journey, but his journey is through books, right? And he reads these books, which are very persuasive. As he says, he's a youthful person. That's just right, But then, as he comes into contact with reality, he realizes, wait a minute, I've got to question these things I've written. And what is it that really is another turning point in the Borderlands? He's got this Israeli-American student who's teaching with them, and they're teaching these underprivileged kids, these poor kids, and most of the teachers are taking this kind of laissez-faire. You got to give them an A, don't discourage them. They're all special. And this kid says, "Oh no, I'm not going to tell a lie. I'm not going to give them a passing grade unless they deserve it." And his class is organized, and then Sohrab realizes that this is the most successful teacher in the whole program because he believes in the truth. He believes in objectivity. He believes in making them learn. I mean, and
also the fact that his students responded to that, right? It's not as if, he's imposing something on them as some sort of oppressor. They responded to the fact that he was expecting truth from them and hard work from them, and that progress can only be made if there is sacrifice. And I think that they respected that, and the lessons that they learned are very valuable ones, and he was just very successful for that reason.
Yes. There's some great descriptive lines in here, how he describes this teacher, um, greeting each student at the door with a firm handshake, delivering rich lessons, never compromising his rules. And now Sohrab says the kids loved him because he supplied the structure and stability that were missing from their homes.
Yeah.
And then he goes on, character and virtue then preceded material circumstances. There was something more in the virtuous, a capacity to recognize the good and a desire to spread it around them, to bring order where disorder prevailed. The kids grasped the passion for order in teachers like Yossi, and they reacted accordingly.
Yeah, that's marvelous, and yet most of these kids are experiencing anarchy in their daily lives, right? Anarchy in their home lives. So the one thing they actually need is some sense of order, and some sense of reality, and some sense of truth, and they were being provided it. And now that's the anchor that they need when they've just set adrift in this anarchic world in which the poor kids, through no fault of their own, because of the culture in which they live with their parents, are they just drifting? And then this man comes along and says, well, "Hold on for a second. Now, there's an anchor. You can put the anchor down, you can make progress."
That's right.
So this is wonderful. We covered chapters 4 through 7. Next week, we will continue. We'll finish the book. And the week thereafter, we hope to have Sohrab here in person to have a finishing discussion with him. Any final comments, Vivian?
I saw him in person Saturday night, and he's great. If you have a chance, all of you out there involved in this, you have a chance to see him in person, please take advantage of it.
Joseph, any final words?
Well, yeah, only that I would sort of perhaps envy Vivian for having met Sohrab Ahmari, except I'm going to meet him during this discussion forum, thanks be to God, in 2 weeks. Now, I had my a little bit of trepidation. I knew nothing about this book when you suggested it, Father, but I thought, yeah, Father knows best. I'm sure if Father suggested it's going to be a good book.
And so this just proved it. This just proved it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It proves you know best, Father. So I just took the book. I don't know if I'm going to enjoy this or not, but we'll give it a go. And honestly, it's a work of genius. It's not just a conversion story. It's a great mind. He writes beautifully, and I'm really looking forward to meeting him in the forum in 2 weeks from now.
So tell your friends about this book club we have, because we think there's some wonderful books here being discussed by some people who know what they're talking about. And this is the point where if we had some music, we'd have our closing music, but we don't have any music. So, so see you all next week. God bless you all.